Hey everyone, welcome to our Blender Beginner series. So this whole series is broken up into 6 different chapters. So in chapter 1, we'll look at how to do all the modeling, so taking basic primitive shapes inside Blender and creating more complex 3D assets. And then chapter 2, we'll have a look at how to UV unwrap all of our models so that we can take it into texturing, which we'll cover in chapter 3. Then chapter 4, we'll look at our lighting and our cameras before we start looking at some surface imperfections. And then finally, we'll do rendering and compositing. So there are some resources that you need to download to be able to follow along. So if you click the link in the description of the video, you will find all the reference images we use to actually model everything. There's also a file of all the custom decals I've created that you can use inside the scene, and there's also an ebook that talks through the whole process as well, so you can either follow along to the videos or you can follow along to the ebook as well. It covers the same things. If you've got any questions about anything as you're going through it, leave a comment in the video that you're struggling with, and I'll get back to you. Hi everyone, welcome back to part 22 of our Blender Beginner course. So we've added our base materials to our scene, so we are going to tweak those, but what we want to do now is start to set up a camera so we know what our shot's going to look like and start to put some basic sort of lighting in place, so we know how it's all going to look, and then we'll start tweaking our materials a little bit. So the first step is to add a camera. Now when we first opened Blender originally, you've got your cube, a sunlight and a camera in, but we deleted all of that, so you need to add a camera. So you do that by going Shift A and then down, and you've got a camera that will appear wherever your 3D cursor is. Now at the minute I can't see it because I've got extras turned off, so I do that, you can actually see the camera is there. Okay, now the reason I've got the extras off is just so all the empties were there. Now if you want to see what the camera is looking at, you just press 0 on your keyboard and I'll show you what it's looking at. Okay, so I find personally the easiest way for me to alter that camera, what you can do is line up the view, sort of the shot that you're after. If you go to view, align view, and align active camera to view, you can click on that and it'll take the shot like that. Now what you can do, like with everything, is right click and add it to quick favorites. So we've got something like that, and then we can decide if we're happy with that. So you can see here that actually that's not bad. We may tweak that slightly, get an idea of where we kind of want to have it all. Little tweaks here and there, something like that. And then what I now may do is actually drag this over. I'm going to change this to viewport shading just so it doesn't actually affect it too much. And what we might do is bring our lamp in a little bit. Something like that. Maybe our can, because our can's not actually in the view at the minute, so let's bring that. Like that. And just tweaking everything how you want it. Something like that. As I said again, we may well change this, but actually not looking too bad at the minute. So we've got that. So I'm going to give that a save. So that's set up the camera. What we're going to start to do as well is add in some base sort of lighting to deal with. So what we'll do is start to add in a couple of different kinds of lighting. Right, so we have the camera. So we look through 0, we can see what we're doing. We kind of moved everything around. Again, feel free to move things around. It doesn't need to look exactly like mine. You want to get as much into this shot. I always explain what you want is you want the illusion that you are in a full room or it's a full scene, when actually if you zoom out, obviously we've just got this sort of set. But if you were to look in the camera there, I quite like when you have things that are sort of like partially in the shot, because it gives the illusion that there's more stuff going on just off, like out of shot. Again, so you got so you see things like the spray paint cans, but then you see a hint of more. Same with down here, you see sort of like a little bit of cardboard, and you see bits of more on there. So we'll set this as like our main shot. So we're going to start adding in some lighting. Now there's a couple of different ways you do lighting. This is where things start to really come alive as well. So the first thing I'll do is use something called a HDRI. So the best place I've found to get that is a website called Polyhaven. So it's completely free. Just type in polyhaven.com. So I've found this particular one, okay, which is Studio Small, and I've set the resolution to 2K because you don't need a really high one, because we're not using it as the actual image. We're going to use it just as the light. And click on download. You can. So if I show you some other ones, say if you were going to do like an interior and you wanted something outside of the window, what you could do is go to outdoor and there are things like fields or trees and that sort of thing. You can get a high resolution image and have the HDRI in the background, and then it will look like outside you can see trees and that sort of thing. It gives you the illusion of that lighting. So I got that studio one. So what we want to do is apply that to it. Now, before we do that, I'm going to come to the render engine tab on the properties here and make sure, so by default it's set to EV. I'm going to click on cycles, make sure I've got GPU compute, so that means it's using your actual graphics card. Now you've got sampling here. Now by default, everything is set as 496, which is 4K resolution, okay? You don't need that much resolution. The top one is just for the viewport, which is just what you see on the screen. The one underneath that where it says render is when you do your final image. Even when you're doing your final image, you don't need to do 4K. Honestly, I have students that do like 100 or 200 samples and it's fine. If you're going to blow it up and it's going to be huge, then yes, you need to have higher samples, but realistically you don't. And if you're doing test renders, you can do it as like between 2 and 5 samples and it's absolutely fine. So I'm going to put the sample size down to something like 5. And when you have denoise, I won't turn that on yet because you'll see what it does, but it's important you have that on when you're doing the final thing. So I'm going to just go into my camera view here. I've downloaded the HDRI that I wanted. So I did the indoor and I got the studio one, and I think I got, which one was it? It was like indoor small studio. And I've downloaded that. I need to put it in. So in my properties, I'm going to come to the world tab and I'm going to come here. It says surface. I'm going to click this little yellow symbol here and change that to environment texture and click on open. And then in my downloads, I'm going to find my HDRI small studio like that. Now at the minute you can't see anything that's going on because we need to be in render view. So that's where we're then going to come to the top right and click on this shader ball there. So you can see if I zoom out, this is the HDRI that's giving off the light in there. This is also why we made a big deal of making sure the scale of everything was correct, because if you don't, lighting has some really weird effects. So making sure that your models are all the real world scale is important. Now I didn't turn denoise on for a reason, so that you can see what's going on. So this is where all these sort of dots are. So you can turn on denoise and it will get rid of sort of all that fuzziness. Okay. Now in the world tab, by default, the strength will be set to 1. That's too strong, in my opinion. Your HDRI shouldn't be like the main story of your lighting, okay? Although it's not bad, but it's like stage 1 of lighting, okay? So what I tend to do is I will go and I'll put that to begin with at something like 0.3. We may change that in a little bit. So that's the first part of lighting, okay? What we're then going to do is add in some more custom lighting. So like with everything, to add things in, you go Shift A to add. I'm going to come to light. And you have these 4 different options here. So the main ones I will use will be area and spotlight. I very rarely use a sunlight and I never use a spotlight, but the main one I use was an area light. So I'm going to click and grab an area light. I'm going to come to the left and just drag it. And I'm going to imagine essentially there's a window behind my little scene there. So I'm going to bring it over, hit R to rotate and bring it out and just sort of bring it into position like that. Okay, now this is important. With cycles, I'm going to have my light selected. And on my light properties down here, if I scroll down, there's an option here called use nodes. So I'm going to click on that. So by the way, sorry, I should do, if I don't do that, we've now added in some extra lighting. Okay, but it kind of looks a bit ineffective, doesn't look great. So I'm going to click on use nodes, and then in the shader editor, what I can do is add something called a gobo, which stands for go between optics, which is a photography term, where essentially I'm going to put something in front of the light to cast a shadow. So I'm going to go Shift A to add an image texture. And I've got a big collection of gobos that I've made inside of Photoshop. So I will do a video showing you how to do all of that inside of Photoshop. So what we're going to do is I've got my whole Blender related things, my whole gobos file. So I'm going to grab this one here. Okay, now at the minute, you can't see anything that's happening to it. Okay, because what we need to do is this option here for spread. So if I change that to 0, you'll see that the shadow appears. Now the problem with that is it's made the shadows very, very straight, very hard edges, which is not how shadows work. So you need to increase that. So if I go to something like 1, it's a bit too soft, so now I can't make out the shadows. So actually, if I do something like, say, like 0.5, you can start to see, obviously, I've got a shadow that's like a window with blinds and a tree. So maybe we even make that a little bit, well, like that. Now I actually want to make that a bit bigger. So let's grab that light. Let's scale it up, come back into position, and we can see how that's starting to look. Like that. And you can see now we're starting to get the effect a bit more of realistic lighting with our shadows casting on everything. Okay, now you can play around with the power. So at the minute by default it's 10. So if I go to like 5, that'll turn the power down a little bit. Although I think maybe I quite liked 10. Go back to 10. Somewhere in the middle. Let's go 7. Something like that. Now this is where you know your scale is off if you have to put the power of your light to a lot, like 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, like that. That's how you know that the scale of everything is off. Okay, so we've got this lighting in here. You can also fake it a little bit by adding in extra lighting. So you might go Shift A, add in a light, add in an area light, come to the top, and you can scale it like any sort of body that you may have. GZ and bring that up. So we've got like an area light coming in there. And we can come in and that adds in extra light. That's quite strong. So let's turn that down. So I don't really want to do that. I'm not a big fan of that for this particular scene, but you can, if it's a bit dark, you can use that to add in extra little bits. The other thing I will sometimes do, which I think gets some really nice effects, is I will Shift A, mesh, and let's add something like a cylinder. And what I'm going to do is delete the top and the bottom. And I'm also going to delete something like those faces there. So if we come to the top, we've got this shape here. I'm going to bring that to the side a bit. Scale that down. Like that. Now what I can do is give that an emissive material. So I can go to New, and I can just turn on the emissiveness. It's like 5, something like that. And then come to the top, bring that into position. And that can be another source of light. So that's probably still far too big. Like that. So you see that then gives another little element to your lighting as well. So those are the sort of different techniques I will use a lot with lighting. So I'll always use a HDRI as like the base of my light. I'll always use a gobo to give like the realistic shadows. And then I'll tend to have like an accent light of like an emissive material to do that sort of thing. So I'm just going to hide that for a second. Bring that back, have a little look. And then what I might do, let's come back to our HDRI. I don't want to go stronger. I think 0.3 might be about right. Okay. So now we've got that. What we're going to do now is have a go at tweaking the materials to add that extra little layer of realism as well. So hopefully you've liked the lighting side of things. Now it's starting to look quite nice. What we're going to do again, is just tweak those materials, make them look really, really real.